That's where my rebellion stemmed from, was saying, hey man, what do you mean girls can't play guitar? Girls have been playing cellos and violins and symphony orchestras for hundreds of years. You're telling me a girl can't play guitar?
Welcome, everybody, to Ladies' Night on Heavy Metal 101. Tonight, everyone drinks for free, and we get to talk about women who rock. John, is this the best night ever at Club HM 101, or what?
As the financial supervisor, I'm concerned that everyone is drinking for free.
Well, holy fucking God, I've wanted to do these particular episodes forever. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but we talk a lot about dudes on this here podcast.
I have noticed that.
Yes. Were you aware of the fact that there are women who also create and perform music?
Just period music.
Yeah, just
wow,
music.
No, I'd never heard of that.
Well, I am aware of this fact, and I'd like to share this fact with you today.
Thank you for sharing.
Yes, it's the least I can do.
Apparently.
I mean, you're about to go off into the university scene. Maybe you should know some things about some stuff. So, in fact, the truth of the matter is that many of my all-time favorite musicians are, in fact, female. My wife often asks me if my ovaries are hurting when I spiel endlessly about my passionate love for instance, Tori Amos. John, are you a Tori Amos fan?
I am aware that Tori Amos is a musician.
What do you think? Tori Amos 101, a future podcast idea?
I think we got enough on our plates.
Okay, that's probably fair. Though I'd argue that there's actually a goodly amount of heavy metal underpinning to a lot of what Tori does, back in the 90s, she was one of the artists that first got me to really start listening to things other than heavy metal, which I think is probably a good thing, right?
I think diversity in your oral experience is a positive.
Yes, it's one of the reasons I am so wise and well-rounded, which is something you've frequently noted on this show.
I definitely have said that.
Many times, yes. Now, I know you're not a particularly passionate person.
That's correct.
But are there any female musicians you're particularly passionate about?
I mean, we're going to talk about Heart today, aren't we? I like Heart.
There you go. Heart are cool.
I knew them before you put them on this playlist.
That shows a lot of chutzpah. I'm glad to know that you knew who they were.
I grew up listening to a lot of Bonnie Raitt. Would you consider Bonnie Raitt metal?
I mean, I'll be honest with you, I fucking love Bonnie Raitt. It's good stuff. Yeah, Bonnie Raitt's amazing. Despite that, I don't know if I'm comfortable putting her into the heavy metal echelons.
All right, well, I suppose that's fair.
Yeah, but she's very cool. I like Bonnie Raitt. Great songwriter. Anyhow, I've been very excited about dedicating some episodes to the women of heavy metal, a subject that a lot of us stupid metal dudes, and probably some stupid metal dudettes as well, are woefully ignorant about. John, I'm not sure I'd characterize you as a stupid metal dude, but I suspect that you
just
too.
Stupid dude?
Yeah. I mean, just generally. But I'm guessing you're pretty ignorant when it comes to women in heavy metal?
For sure.
Yeah. Now, is this because you're a disgusting sexist pig, or is it just because you're a big stinky dummy?
No, I'm an equal opportunity ignorist. I don't know anything about metal, regardless of who's making it.
That's why
as we have discussed numerous times on this show.
This is why you are so useful to me.
That is the purpose I serve.
Yes, and you do it unbelievably well.
Thank you. I work really hard.
I know you do. I know. Okay, so I like to think that once we get a little bit further along into our semi-chronological heavy metal narrative, we're gonna eventually come to a point where we'll be able to incorporate our female metal stars just a wee bit more organically. I mean, you can't talk about 21st century metal and not mention massively monumental metal queens like Angela Gossow, Nita Strauss, or Chelsea Wolfe. Am I right?
I literally did not recognize any of those names.
Fuck yeah. You're doing your thing, John, and I love it.
Crushing it.
So here's the thing. I'm a context guy. I believe very firmly that all discussions about music, for instance, heavy metal, benefit from an understanding of the wider context from which said music first emerged.
Cut to Hildegard von Bingen.
So this is why we spent our entire first season on bands that many people don't even accept as heavy metal, and also why we occasionally do stuff like talk about the blues or classical music as those things pertain to heavy metal. And I know you love it when we do shit like that, right?
It feels like a real good use of time.
Guess what?
What, Eric?
We're about to do shit like that. I believe in order to best understand the incredibly rich, important female artistic contributions to the history of heavy metal, we need to first go back a wee bit further and take a gander at some of the incredibly rich, important female artistic contributions more broadly to the development of rock and roll.
Rock and roll!
In reality, while sexism has always been a huge issue, rock never really was a boys' club, and I hate that conventional narrative. Women have been around doing shit every bit as consequential as their male counterparts since the very beginning. So we're going to spend some amount of time peeking past the curtain of institutional and cultural sexism, and we're going to discuss, for instance, how a queer black woman, not Elvis fucking Presley, invented rock and roll, and how many of the greatest artists across rock's formative history were without penises. You don't need a dick to rock, John. So are you ready to purge yourself of all the sexist bullshit and to take this compelling musical journey with me?
Let's go.
All right. Muy excelente. Now, I will remind our listeners via a callback to our incredibly compelling blues episode.
If you do say so yourself.
You loved that episode.
Wow.
You loved it.
That has no bearing on how you identify it as an episode.
Incredibly compelling is
Yeah.
how I identify it. Well, in that episode, we discussed how the recorded legacy of the blues, arguably the most important of heavy metal's beloved forebearers, began with an assortment of utterly badass female singers, including Ma Rainey, who recorded her first tune all the way back in 1923, as well as the Empress of the Blues, Bessie Smith, who we discussed at some length on said blues episode. John, is all this ringing some bells?
I remember.
Okay, great. That means we don't need to begin this episode of our heavy metal podcast in the 1920s.
Oh, goody!
Yeah, it's so
How
nice.
far forward do we get to jump, Eric?
In fact, John, we can flash all the way forward to 1938. Jesus Christ. Which is the year when all good heavy metal podcasts should begin, right?
Just keep going.
The Dirty 30s.
Take me back to old Yazoo.
This was when the founding mother of rock and roll, the great Sister Rosetta Tharpe, had her first hit single, the appropriately titled Rock Me. Interestingly, although 1938 was long before anyone was talking about a genre called rock and roll, a contemporary review of Rock Me described Tharpe's, quote, rock and roll spiritual singing. The term rock and roll didn't really start to make it into public consciousness until around 1951 via the radio programming of DJ Alan Freed, so that's pretty fascinating. Anyhow, John, what do you know about Sister Rosetta Tharpe?
I mean, I have heard of Sister Rosetta Tharpe.
Good.
I've heard some of her music. You put her on the playlist
I
for
did.
me, and
I did.
had heard that song before, and I've heard others of hers, but I don't know a terrible amount about her history.
Well, I think we're going to rectify that right now.
Oh, are we?
We sure are, buddy.
Who could have seen that coming?
Well, aside from the fact that she is said queer African-American woman who I mentioned earlier, possessed of a complicated, incredibly ahead of her time love life that I'm not going to go into today, I believe a good faith argument can most certainly be made that Sister Rosetta Tharpe was the inventor, or at least the earliest adopter, of rock and roll. You know, there are a lot of people who would tell you, not without some amount of justification, that the first rock and roll song was Rocket 88, a 1951 hit that was credited to Jackie Brenston and his Delta Cats, a band that was more usually known as Ike Turner and his Kings of Rhythm. Are you familiar with Rocket 88?
No.
Oh, good song.
Okay.
Regardless, another strong and considerably earlier candidate for, quote, first rock and roll song was the rocking gospel of Sister Rosetta Tharpe's recording of the spiritual Strange Things Happen Every Day from all the way back in 1945. So as you mentioned, I put this on your playlist. What do you think? Is this rock and roll? Is it proto-rock and roll? Is it just fucking great regardless?
I'll give you that last qualifier.
It's really good, right?
Yeah, it's great.
Mhm.
I do not feel qualified to place it in a musical genre.
I think that's fair.
I
think that's
also listen to everything you send me through the lens of is this heavy metal or not, and the answer is decidedly no.
I'm going to side with you on this one. Sister Rosetta Tharpe, as much as I really, really like her work, probably not heavy metal. Yeah. Although, fun fact, she was one of the first artists to ever use distortion on a guitar.
That is exciting.
So, although that doesn't in and of itself make her heavy metal, it's definitely an early contributor to the genre. To my mind, one of the things that makes this song so special is how very streamlined it is. You got Tharp's voice and her just absolutely shit-kicking guitar, right? The guitar playing is great, just great. It's accompanied only by piano, bass, and drums. And we're in the 40s. This is like the ending swath of the swing, sort of big band era.
Right.
So it's very different. It's a very different thing. It really is pointing the way in a wholly new direction to what we're going to understand as rock and roll once a bunch of white dudes start adopting it in the 1950s. Regardless of whether or not we call this a rock and roll tune, it and all of her early work was hugely influential on that first generation of rock and rollers, and this earned her the nickname Godmother of Rock and Roll. Hell, Tharp is even credited, as I mentioned, with being one of the first artists to use a distortion effect on her guitar, which might make her the godmother of heavy metal too. Bad fucking ass, I tell ya. So this one does require some assigned listening. The fact that not everyone in the entire world knows about this incredibly important artist is a freaking sin, and so we're going to do our wee part here and now to remedy that. So everybody pause the podcast and get a rockin' and a rolling with one of the coolest people ever, the late great godmother of rock and roll, Sister Rosetta Tharp. Now, John, I know that you're an idiot.
Fuck you.
And that you have some amount of trouble appreciating the beauty to be found in early rock and roll. We've discussed that. But surely you'll grant that this here is some historically significant awesomeness going on.
This stuff I like.
It's really good. I mean, the fact that she's like a shredding, innovative guitarist, that's pretty cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
But also just, this is
It's good.
yeah.
Okay, good. I mean, amen. Strange things happen every day. It's a great song. It was the first song, actually, to ever cross over from the gospel charts to the rather unfortunately named race records charts, where it made it all the way to a number 2. So it was a certified hit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Despite the unfortunate chart name, significant.
Look, we didn't make that.
I don't blame myself.
Yeah.
I blame you.
Wow.
I know, I feel bad.
That would be an insane power for me to have.
You're a powerful man. Okay, now I want to be abundantly clear here. Finding important female artists to discuss and highlight for these episodes was not difficult. The challenge was in sifting through such an overabundance of great material and in making editorial decisions about who to include and who to omit. John, it turns out that playing God is hard. You of all people should know that I am not comfortable taking center stage and portraying the role of some sort of omniscient supposed expert. And yet, my friend, this is my cross to bear. Do you feel for me?
What? You literally started a whole show so that you could do that. We dedicate episodes to things that you just like.
It's hard being me, John. It's hard being me.
I believe that.
But we soldier onwards. I think one thing worth acknowledging is that a lot of the women we'll be discussing today are singers. Tharp, of course, was a fantastic and powerful vocalist, but it is crucial to note that she was also an absolutely incredible and really genuinely innovative guitar player. A double threat. John, that's like you with your conducting and your podcast co-hosting abilities.
If you add my ability to play piano, I'm a full-board triple threat.
Whoa. Triple threat it is.
Let's go.
Congrats. I say hats off to all you talented people. See, my only gift is my overwhelming physical beauty.
Shame that we're stuck here in this oral medium.
Frankly, John, it's as much a burden as it is a gift. Anyhow, our godmother of rock and roll was active in the late 30s, but she was really laying the foundational work for what would begin to become rock and roll over the course of the 1940s. We now move ourselves along to the 1950s. We're just rolling right along.
Wow,
I know.
really? 12 years, let's go.
A decade defined by a baby boom, but also the period when a bunch of young white dudes were stealing the spotlight from important African-American women like Sister Rosetta Tharp, and also from the extraordinarily cool Willie Mae Thornton, better known as Big Mama Thornton. John, are you familiar with Big Mama?
Again, this was another artist that know by name, know a few songs, but don't know a terrible amount of her history.
Okay. Shall we discuss her?
Let's do it.
All right. Now, Thornton is best known as a singer, and she's a fucking awesome singer. I absolutely love her voice. However, early in her career, she also played drums and harmonica, touring the southern United States with a group called the Hot Harlem Review. She signed a recording contract in 1951 and recorded a song that had been composed for her by some up-and-coming young Jewish songwriters by the names of Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller. I'm guessing these are familiar names to you?
I've heard of Lieber and Stoller.
Okay, you know that they exist?
Yeah.
There's a musical about them. Yeah, good. Should we do an episode on that?
No. You know what? Wait. If you can figure out a way to justify discussing that musical on your heavy metal podcast, I will happily participate in said recording.
I really appreciate that. So, they're nice Jewish boys, they're my people, and, of course, they really were incredible and important songwriters, right? And very significant. Yeah. More on them perhaps some other time, but...
Seems unlikely.
But this particular song was one of their earliest. It's a little ditty called Hound Dog. Now, Doja Cat fans will have some amount of familiarity with Thornton's 1952 version, which is the sampled basis for Doja Cat's Vegas. John, are you a fan of that song?
No. I can't say I'm not I don't know any.
You don't know if you know it?
Yeah.
Okay. I actually really dig that song. My daughter's introduced me to it.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Though the best iteration of Hound Dog is neither Doja Cat's nor the 10 million selling 1956 Elvis Presley version. Big Mama Thornton's original is totally my fucking jam. It is so awesome. For the record, Thornton's version was not a flop at all. It sold 500,000 copies and hit #1 on the R&B charts. They were called the R&B charts at that time, so that's an improvement.
Progress!
Yes, exactly. That said, speaking of progress or the lack thereof, apparently Thornton received $500 for this recording.
That tracks.
Yeah. So, fuck the world and everyone in it, right?
Yeah.
Now, we're going to move it along here, but I will point out something interesting. Thornton's Hound Dog is generally understood as an R&B classic, while Elvis's version from 4 years later is universally considered to be a rock and roll classic. This, despite the fact that Thornton's version rocks quite a lot harder than Elvis's.
Yeah, way more.
Yeah. So, people are dumb, possibly racist. Wouldn't you agree?
You're going to qualify that? People are both dumb and definitely racist.
Yeah, people are dumb and racist.
Especially in the 1950s.
Ooh, yeah. Dumber and racister. Now, John, would you also agree that every human should listen to Big Mama Thornton's recording of Hound Dog?
Yes. Actually, yes.
Oh my gosh!
Genuinely, yes.
It's a John-certified banger.
Yeah.
It's essential listening. So, dear listener, pause the podcast. You don't need some silly break audio cue. That's so HM 101 season #2. It's old hat. Just pause the fucking show and give her a listen. We'll wait. So as we transition from the 50s into the 60s, I want to mention a non-singer of monumental import who's probably not a household name, though I guess that depends on your particular household. From 1957 well into the 21st century, this woman played either bass or guitar on literally 10 zillion incredible recordings. I shit you not. She was on La Bamba. She was on You've Lost That Loving Feeling. You're gonna get us sued now. Great.
Oh, come on, that wasn't enough.
It's also a folk song, so it's okay. You sing it. Sing it, John. Sing it for us. She was on You've Lost That Loving Feeling. Don't sing that. That is not a folk song. She played on fucking Pet Sounds by the fucking Beach Boys.
Okay.
Yeah. She did some guitar work on the first Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention album. She played on classic TV theme song recordings, including The Addams Family, Batman, and Hawaii Five-0.
Nice.
Yeah, Jimmy frickin' Christmas. I could keep going and going, as the discography of the great Carol Kay is absolutely mind-blowing. John, you're a bassist. Are you familiar with this badass bassist?
I am.
Oh, good. Wow, you know so much.
We're hitting a weird wheelhouse for me so far
I
in
know.
this episode.
You should be writing this episode. I like it. By way of coincidence, Kay actually popped up in heavy metal news not long ago, when drummer Carmen Appice posted a joke online about her actually having been the session bass player for all the early Motley Crue recordings, after Nikki Sixx had said something about not really knowing how to play bass back then. Blah, blah, blah. People freaked out, but it was a joke. He was just being silly, because she played on, like, everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's funny. So the basic background on Kay is that she was a guitar player who moved to LA to play on the jazz and big band circuit in the 1950s, and then started to get session work, particularly working for some heavy hitters and monumental weirdos, Phil Spector and Brian Wilson. She switched to bass in 1963 after a bassist was a no-show at a recording session. I'm sure you...
So insulting.
Well, I'm sure you and I can both agree that bassists are generally a collection of terribly unreliable pseudo-humans, right?
I mean, kind of, yeah.
Yeah, I thought you'd be with me on that one. Now, following that incident, and because electric bass is essentially guitar for dummies, Kay quickly... You agree with that too, don't you?
I hate that.
Kay quickly went on to become one of the most sought-after bass players in the LA session musician world. During the 60s and 70s, she was a member of the legendary band The Wrecking Crew, who basically were the backing band for about 97% of the hit records recorded during those decades. John, how fucking cool is Carol Kay?
Carol Kay is badass.
Yeah, she is the shit. Just so fucking cool. Okay, before we wade our way more deeply into the 60s, I want to spend just a few moments reflecting on the true classic era of rock and roll when giants roamed the earth. This period lasted roughly from 1954, when DJ Alan Freed moved from Cleveland to the much bigger market of New York and brought the sounds and the lingo to that larger audience.
Hello, everybody. How are you all? This is yours truly, Alan Freed. Get your dancing shoes on and welcome to the Rock and Roll Dance Party!
Until February 3rd, 1959, the day the music died, when Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and the Big Bopper all died in a plane crash, and rock and roll lost its youthful innocence forever. It's very sad. Anyhow, I want to briefly reflect upon the status of female artists specifically during this formative period. Now, doesn't that sound like fun?
Sure.
All right. Well, I mean, thus far we've talked about a lot of heavy hitters. Mm-hmm. The people we're about to talk about, I would say, are heavy hitters in terms of talent, but nobody knows who the fuck they are, which is a bit of a bummer. They just never broke through, probably because of their gender. I think it's hard to ignore that. It's sexism. It's fucking sexism. And yet, it is important to acknowledge that early female rock and rollers did exist. So, John, I'm actually going to name some names. So far, you've been great. You've been killing it. I suspect we're going to fall off a bit here.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me if any of these ring a bell. Wanda Jackson.
I don't think so.
Janice Martin.
No.
Joanne Campbell.
Can't say yes.
How about Lori Collins?
No.
It's 0 for 4, John. It's not great.
Yeah.
But look, I suspect you're not remotely alone, and that most people polled on those names would probably come up empty too. So it's okay. Don't beat yourself up. In the very same era, when female pop singers like Doris Day and Rosemary Clooney were superstars, early female rockers just were simply not able to catch on in anything like the same way their world-beating male counterparts did. Janice Martin, for instance, was known as the female Elvis, but sadly just a shit ton less famous. Wanda Jackson, who actually toured with Elvis for a time, worked at that fascinating intersection between rock and country that went by the sort of offensive and sort of endearing name Rockabilly. She ended up with the nickname the Queen of Rockabilly and did manage one top 40 hit, Let's Have a Party. Now, my own favorite of these early women rock and rollers is Lori, which is short for Lauren Scene, which is not a great name.
Lauren Scene?
Lauren Scene. That's a weird name. Huh. I don't love it. But Lori Collins, she was a part of a teenage duo with her brother, Larry. See what's going on here? Called the Collins
Larry
Kids.
and Lauren Scene?
That's correct.
One of those names is fine. The other one is just hard.
That's not good. The Collins Kids, pretty fascinating group. Their original tune, Heartbeat, I think is a total early rock and roll shit kicker. I actually put that one on your playlist. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
You like it?
Not really.
And that one didn't float your boat?
No.
No.
I mean, following Hound Dog, that was rough.
Okay, I get that. It's not Hound Dog. She's not Big Mama Thornton. But it's a good tune. I think it's a very cool tune.
It wasn't a bad tune. It's just...
Yeah, all right. And yet, none of these people became anything approaching the names that their male counterparts became. As we start to transition to some of the more serious heavy hitters that people are going to be very familiar with, I do want to spend a few minutes discussing the problematically named phenomenon, the girl group. Now, this was nothing new in the 1960s. While none of the female rockers we just discussed were able to make a substantial dent in the charts, girl groups like the Ronettes, the Shirelles, and the Supremes were all freaking huge during that decade. John, I imagine that at least some of those are familiar names to you?
I know all three of those.
Aha! Examples of songs that pretty much everyone on God's green earth knows would include Will You Love Me Tomorrow, recorded by the Shirelles in 1960, with music composed by yet another female musical legend, songwriter Carole King. Mm-hmm. That tune was the first by an all-female African-American group to hit #1 on the pop charts. Now, this is 100% because of the horrible racist way the charts were structured, but it's still an accomplishment of note. The Ronettes, featuring the late fabulously great Ronnie Spector, worked with the late fucking awful monstrosity Phil Spector, may he rot in hell, and had a variety of hits, including the all-time classic Be My Baby from 1963, which was co-written by Jeff Barry, Phil Spector, and an exceptional singer-slash-songwriter named Ellie Greenwich. She was involved in the writing of a whole bunch of other classics as well, including Then He Kissed Me and Leader of the Pack, both nifty old rock and roll tunes which eventually were covered by pop metal bands, respectively by Kiss and Twisted Sister. And John, I think you'll agree if you're writing songs awesome enough to be covered by Kiss and Twisted Sister, you're clearly doing something right, no?
I mean, I'm not for that reasoning, but I think the answer to your question fundamentally is yes.
Yeah, good. Because you love Kiss and Twisted Sister. Probably Kiss more than Twisted Sister. I get it. One more girl group, which also provides us with quite a heavy hitter as a future solo artist, would be Motown's finest, the Supremes, a group who went on to release 12 #1 singles. By 1967, they were being billed as Diana Ross and the Supremes. And Diana Ross was most definitely to the Supremes as Beyoncé, someday, would be to Destiny's Child. Now, John, I believe that's our very first Beyoncé reference here on Heavy Metal 101. Seems like a landmark occasion, right?
I will be writ into the history books.
Hello, Bayhive! Anyhow, the Supremes indeed had a zillion hits, but Where Did Our Love Go, written by the legendary Holland Dozier Holland writing team and recorded by the Supremes in 1964, is a particularly excellent exemplar. Now, Diana Ross, significant as she is, had a magnificent career that took her pretty far afield from rock music. Another sort of rock-adjacent master, more than worthy of mention today, is the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin. Her mind-blowing reworking of Otis Redding's Respect may be generally understood more as soul than rock, but it's hell of a recording, and Franklin is a singing, piano-playing icon to women and men all across the musical multiverse. John, are you a fan of Aretha's magnificently powerful, mellifluous singing?
Absolutely.
You're fucking awesome, right?
Yeah. I mean, star of the Blues Brothers.
Oh, God, your favorite movie. Yeah, that was really the peak of her career, I would say. I actually had a cassette tape with Respect on it when I was just a wee lad. I used to play the ever-loving hell out of it and sort of bop around. That said, while Ross and Franklin were certainly rocking extraordinarily talented women, at this point we've gotten ourselves more than a bit removed from the particular idea of, quote, women in rock. So we're going to switch gears, and we're going to relocate ourselves to the west coast of these United States and talk about two of the great female rock singers of the 1960s, Grace Slick and Janis Joplin. John, first off, I have to know, are you a Jefferson Airplane guy or a Jefferson Starship guy?
I'm not really a Jefferson guy.
I am also not a Jefferson guy. I don't like the Starship or the airplane all that much.
It's not really my cup of tea.
They're okay. But regardless, Grace Barnett Wing, better known by her married name, Grace Slick, was a critically important player in San Francisco's psychedelic rock scene in the mid-60s as the front person for Jefferson Airplane. Now, this scene was really sort of the same stew from which emerged a lot of early American proto-heavy metal, most particularly the band Blue Cheer, who we'll probably talk about some future date. Now, amongst other things, Grace Slick also penned White Rabbit, which was a top 10 hit. Now, Slick was actually Jefferson Airplane's second female singer, taking over for Signe Tolley Anderson, another female rocker of somewhat less renown, just in time for their all-important sophomore breakthrough album, Surrealistic Pillow, from 1967. It's a fucking terrible album.
Yeah, that's awful.
Yeah. Though I don't love Jefferson Airplane, Somebody to Love is indeed a pretty great fucking song. What do you like that one?
I know that one.
Yeah. Okay. You know it exists.
Yeah.
All right. Pretty hard rocking, too.
Okay.
Yeah. But Jefferson Airplane, they're just never my thing. Apparently they were never John's thing either.
Everyone is shocked.
Though John does sleep with a surrealistic pillow, interesting.
I do, yeah.
Now, another truly, truly amazing woman who emerged from the very same San Francisco scene has always very much been my thing. And that is the incredible Janis Joplin. Woo! First with Big Brother and the Holding Company, and then at the very end of her way too brief life as a solo artist. She is up there with the aforementioned Aretha Franklin on the short list of all-time great female singers.
Oh, yes, indeed.
John, are you, like all right-thinking people, a Janis Joplin fan? Her voice is too good for you?
Sure.
It's too awesome?
Let's say that. I mean, look, I'm just going to plead my normal level of ignorance
Okay.
here. I don't know enough Janis Joplin to say, yes, I like Janis Joplin, or no, I don't like Janis Joplin.
Okay. I mean, I think with Janis Joplin vocally, we really are getting into some proto-metal territory at this point. I mean, it's a very, very powerful instrument. Fucking great. Now, we've actually got some amount of fun-filled woman in rock interconnectivity here. You see, one of the breakthrough moments for Big Brother and Co. was their 1967 performance at the Monterey Pop Festival, which is best remembered for their killer rendition of the song Ball and Chain, which was originally written and recorded by one Big Mama Thornton. That's fun, right?
Yeah. Look at you've made a crossover.
I have connected things. It's practically a fun fact. We're almost in fun fact territory here. Now, Joplin, unsurprisingly, was actually very heavily influenced by Thornton, another very powerful voiced and, sort of dirty-toned singer. This is why we're doing this whole wonderful woman in rock history thing, so we can trace influence and inspiration all the way to the glorious heavy metal ladies of the 1980s. You see what I did there?
Okay.
Yeah. Anyhow, Joplin and Co.'s second album, Cheap Thrills, from 1968, was Big Bro's big breakthrough. That, incidentally, is a literary device called alliteration. John, I'm on fucking fire here.
If you say so.
Yeah. Cheap Thrills included such classics as Piece of My Heart and an absolutely killer rock iteration of George Gershwin's aria from Porgy and Bess, Summertime. You like that one?
Yeah.
Janis Joplin's version?
I don't know it.
You don't know it?
No.
Really?
Really.
Jeez, I should have put that on your playlist.
You should have.
Yeah. Whoops.
But you didn't.
I didn't. What a wasted
I'll
opportunity.
never hear it.
Fuck! The climactic conclusion of that album, however, is a 9-minute live version of Ball and Chain, this one which was recorded at the Fillmore East in March of 1968. Now this motherfucker deserves a listening break. A long listening break. This music is, as the kids say, heavy. So let's all get down and dirty with Janis, Big Mama Thornton, and the boys from Big Brother. John, you ready for this?
No.
Yeah. Everybody pause the podcast, smoke some hashish, click on the link, and get groovy for a 9+ minute late 60s mega jam. Fuck me. That was beautiful. John, how are you feeling?
I mean, this isn't my cup of tea.
I know it's not your cup of tea, but it's delicious tea. It's strong tea. It's tea that makes you hallucinate, I think. Yeah, you don't like hallucinogenic tea?
No.
Yeah. Well, to me, it's some goodly, electrified rockin' blues, and the vocal is fucking outrageously amazing. You don't like the vocal on that?
Not my cup of tea. Not saying it's bad, just not for me.
All right. Would you agree that the vocal qualifies as something resembling extreme?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So we're starting here now to transition into something like proto heavy metal at this point.
Sure. That's fine. There is
Okay.
a very heavy feel to this 9.5 minute song.
And it's worth noting, the term heavy, the heavy part of heavy metal, that comes from this scene, that comes from these hippies saying like, dude, that's heavy. And they kind of meant music like this, and also, Vietnam War and crap like that. So we're in the thick of it. We took LSD, we're hallucinating, and we're in the thick of it. After parting ways with Big Bro, Janis performed as a solo artist at Woodstock in 1969, and she recorded 2 solo albums, including her iconic last release, Pearl, before she was discovered dead of a heroin overdose on October 4th, 1970. Let that be a lesson to us all, kind listeners. Stay the fuck away from the heroin. John, are you good with that as the moral to this story?
I'm great with that as our moral.
I thought so. So do LSD, don't do heroin. That's what John says.
Didn't think we were doing that first part.
Oh.
Just don't do heroin.
He probably shouldn't have finished that iced coffee that I spiked.
Oh, man.
Rest in peace, Janis. For the record, She was yet another member of the famed 27 Club that began back with Robert Johnson. Sigh. Meanwhile, on to brighter and more joyous things. We need to celebrate the life and times of the Queen of Rock and Roll. John, who is the Queen of Rock and Roll?
I have no idea.
It's Anna Mae Bullock, of course, you fucking idiot. Of course, most listeners, and probably you as well, will be vastly more familiar with Her Royal Highness via her famed stage name, Tina Goddamn Turner.
Oh, okay.
Sound more familiar to you?
Yeah, I have heard of Tina Turner.
I thought you might have. Now, she of the legendary voice and legs sadly did pass away earlier this year, but at the considerably more reasonably ripe old age of 83, and after a life very well lived. Said life, of course, was not without its difficulties. They made a movie about it. One of those difficulties was a very talented shithead by the name of Ike Turner. Who was Tina's husband and also her musical partner in the Ike and Tina Turner Revue. He was also a world-class turd as a human being with a propensity for violently beating his wife. And as if our queen wasn't already surrounded with enough world-class turdage, the couple broke big in Europe via a hit album there produced by that other walking mound of human excrement, Phil Spector. Yikes! Who was, among other things, a murderer. So, John, who would you rather beat up, Phil Spector or Ike Turner?
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's a difficult question. I guess I'll go with Phil Spector.
I respect that. I totally respect that. I feel like I might go for Ike Turner, so we could we
got it covered.
We got it covered. It really is Sophie's fucking choice. They're just terrible, terrible human beings. Towards the end of their artistic partnership, Ike and Tina produced some wildly iconic hits, including their just unbelievably great cover of Creedence Clearwater Revival's Proud Mary in 1971. Now, I didn't put that on your playlist because I assumed you absolutely know that one.
I do know that.
Okay, good. Now, I don't want to get too deep into Tina's post-Ike phantasmic second act. Suffice it to say that she divorced him in 1978, and by 1984 was selling 20+ million copies of her first solo album, the fabulous Private Dancer. We love you, Tina. John. What? John. What? Is it me? Or has the temperature in here suddenly dropped like 20 degrees?
God, I wish.
And why is there a chill mist suddenly rolling in from the sides of the room?
Did you actually take LSD?
John! Is it time, at last, to plumb the darkest of depths? I feel almost as though it were the year 1969, and that we have found ourselves in the midst of a blackened satanic mass. Incidentally, you look really sharp in your hooded black robe.
Thank you.
You get what we're doing here?
I got no idea where we're going.
It's a bit.
Oh, it's a bit?
Yeah,
Are we
it's a
doing
bit. We did a bit.
Oh, I love bits.
Now, John, it is now time to talk about a band that was so very fucking evil that there are some people out there who would point to them and not our beloved Black Sabbath as the first heavy metal band.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah. It is time, at long last, to talk about Jinx Dawson and Coven. Now, you probably don't recall this since you've got the memory of a fucking goldfish.
Accurate.
But Coven actually came up on the very first episode of Heavy Metal 101. Does that sound familiar?
No.
No less a figure than Rolling Stone critic Lester Bangs.
Oh, our favorite.
Yes, our good friend. He's back.
We love Lester.
Lester compared Black Sabbath to Coven in his review of Sabbath's eponymous debut album. So, John, could you read us this historically significant quote?
Boy, I get to read more Lester.
You get to embody Lester. You are Lester. You are Lester. You are Lester. You are Lester.
In England lie unskilled laborers like Black Sabbath, which was hyped as rocking ritual celebration of the satanic mass, something like England's answer to Coven.
Bazinga! And frankly, Bangs makes this comparison with something like good reason. Not only were Coven a band utterly steeped in dark occult themes, but the first song on their 1969 debut, the deliciously titled Witchcraft Destroys Minds and Reaps Souls.
That's too long.
It is a little long.
You could just witchcraft.
But it's delicious.
Okay.
Yeah. It actually has an opening track that was titled Black Sabbath. Mind you, this was an American band recording 1 year before Black Sabbath released their debut album. Nobody knew who the fuck they were at that point.
Sure.
And, as if that weren't enough, it just so happened that Coven had a bassist named Oz Osbourne.
Wow.
Yeah, John, do all these eerie coincidences have you just a bit unnerved?
No.
Not even a little bit?
No. I mean, the world is a simulation, so there's only so many possible outcomes.
An understanding of Coven's occult bona fides most definitely requires some photographic evidence. John, please describe, for those few remaining listeners who have not yet run away screaming from this podcast in sheer abject terror, what the back cover of Coven's debut album looked like.
The back cover?
The back cover, it's a little more illustrative. The front cover is fine too, but the back cover has something that I want to make a particular point
was the
about.
first back cover discussion.
I think you might be right. I
Wow.
think you might be right. I think there's actually a gatefold cover as well that we're not going to talk about. The gatefold cover involves nudity.
Ooh.
I know. But we're not going to deal with that. We're dealing with the back cover today.
Okay.
Yes. I want you to pay particular attention to the hands of the two gentlemen in the picture.
So, what we see here is what they should have titled the album, Witchcraft, and then Coven, and then words that are quite frankly too small to read.
That's the destroys minds and reaps souls.
Oh, so
portion
it
of the
was
title.
really just Witchcraft. With
This is the
subtitle.
inside cover. It's
Witchcraft, destroys minds.
I think it's a hyphen, actually.
Okay. So in the foreground, we see a table laid out with what you could call occult items.
Might you refer to that as possibly an altar?
Yeah, that could be an altar.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a red. Does it have a cloth over it, or is it just red?
I'm pretty sure it's got a red tablecloth. It's kind of orange.
We got some skulls. We got some upside down crosses.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like there's some candles. And then behind the altar, we have three individuals all dressed in black and looking very, very serious.
Yes.
And the two gentlemen on the sides are making the devil horns.
The devil horns! Now, we've discussed this. Ronnie James Dio is the one who famously popularized their use in heavy metal. This was in the late 1970s. But Coven chanteuse Jinx Dawson, who had been raised in a family steeped in witchcraft and the occult, brought the devil horns to pop music considerably earlier, opening and closing Coven shows throughout the late 1960s with the gesture. Pretty intense, right?
Is it? I mean, when you say opening with the jet, see, okay, what's hanging me up here is that basically the symbol you're making is the sign that teachers at my elementary school used to make to be quiet.
Isn't it quiet camel or something like that?
Well, so we were the Huffman Huskies, so this was the quiet husky, but yeah, it's not.
So you don't think it's
It's not particularly traumatizing.
even
to
with
me.
the 666 with the stupid.
Yeah, no.
I get it. Well, at this point, it's time for just a little bit of a letdown. Are you ready for a little bit of a letdown?
I've been living one my whole life. What could possibly happen now?
Well, despite all their awesome satanic imagery and the fact that the debut album concludes with a 13-minute oral depiction of a satanic mass, musically, Coven were just like kind of a groovy 60s psychedelic rock band. They were definitely not a metal band. They're not even close to a metal band.
That is correct.
I included the song Wicked Woman on your playlist. What do you think?
That was fine.
It's okay. I'm not really a big Coven fan. I find their music kind of stupid.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just not my thing. I think Jinx Dawson has a nice voice. I don't think their songwriting's anything to write home about.
Yeah, I would not try to argue with you.
Now, I have listened to the entire 13-minute Satanic Mass, and it conjured demons, and I was possessed for about 6 days.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was cool. Yeah. That said, Coven are pretty fascinating. Like, they're totally my thing in spirit, if not in actual practice. Most especially singer Jinx Dawson is hella fascinating. So, John, I've written out some fun facts about Jinx in English so plain, I think even you can manage it.
Okay.
Teach us, O master metal scholar in training, using your best spooky bio information, voiceover voice.
Jinx Dawson was born on Friday, January 13th, 1950.
Ooh, spooky!
In Indianapolis.
Ooh, the home of the Colts football's scariest team.
The birth was challenging as Jinx was a twin, but her sibling had died in the womb.
Dead babies, creepy dead babies.
The delivery was performed by a Dr. Jinx. That's Jinks, who was the origin of her name, Jinx, Jinx. Like all good little girls, Jinx grew up studying opera.
and the occult.
Satan, Satan, scary Satan.
This was a family tradition. She, along with drummer Stephen Ross and bassist Oz Osborne,
Ooh, like Ozzy Osbourne,
put Coven together in Chicago in the late 1960s.
Now, I actually have no idea how much of the above is true and how much of it might just be bullshit that she sort of put out laudably for the purposes of a sinister image.
It seems weird, even as an opera person, that anyone would grow up in a family that studied opera and the occult. It seems unlikely.
It does seem unlikely, but regardless of whether or not it's true, it's a very solid backstory, I think. I like it.
But it's got to have a gimmick.
Yeah. Now, in interviews, she talks about how she grew up listening to classical music and just really didn't know any rock music. And so once they put the band together, the guys apparently made her drop acid and listen to King Crimson.
Huh.
Now, I love that, and I'm thinking about doing the same thing with you, but replacing King Crimson with King Diamond. What do you think?
Sure.
That's so awesome. That's going to be a good time. It's going to be a good 14 hours.
God.
Now, meanwhile, John, I have a question.
Oh.
We've been sitting here for a while, so how is your fanny?
Fine.
My fanny is great as well. It's really great. You see, in this case, I am referring to the band Fanny, who, alas, are not so very well remembered these days. Are you familiar with Fanny?
No, this was the worst setup of all the setups you've ever written.
It's funny. I got more to come.
Boy, everybody buckle up. We're into Eric's butt humor.
But as we now transition fully into the 1970s for our final push, I thought it important to mention the first all-female rock band with a top 40 hit. Okay. The Filipino-American ensemble.
Let's go!
Fanny. So, John, are you a fan?
I will be just honest and ignore that and say I've never heard of Fanny.
Well, Fanny, to me, they sound a bit dated here in 2023, but their existence was really important, and they helped pave the way for some monumentally important all-female rock bands that were to come. Now, Charity Ball was the first of their 2 top 40 hits. What did you think of that?
Okay, so actually having briefly off-air revisited Fanny, dated may actually make more sense because that does sound like earlier than the 70s in terms of their...
It's a little hokey. So you loved it?
No.
Yeah, me neither. Meh. Anyhow, it is historically important stuff, and we here at Heavy Metal 101, we care about history. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. But now, we're indeed in our final push. It is time to talk about the 1970s, and just a few of the women who truly laid those final foundational bricks for the heavy metal ladies of the 1980s. Johnny, what do you know about Suzi Quatro?
I mean, I recognize that name, but really I don't know anything about Suzi Quatro.
Okay. Well, what do you know about Leather Tuscadero?
Hey!
Fully nothing.
Fucking Happy Days, John. What the hell is wrong with you?
Again, I was born in 1991.
Did you never watch Happy Days?
No.
Oh, that's a good show. Well, we are herein more concerned with Quattro's musical career, but her 7-episode arc on Happy Days, starring as the younger sister of Fonzie's old flame, Pinky Tuscadero, is certainly worthy of note. Susie, my friend, is a woman of many talents.
Okay.
Yeah. Susan K. Quatro was born in 1950 in Detroit, Michigan, but she really had her biggest commercial success in Europe, hitting #1 on a multitude of charts there in 1973 with her song Can the Can. Now, John, I put Can the Can on your playlist. Are you a fan of Can the Can?
It was okay.
It's rocking.
Yeah. It felt a little older, honestly.
Yeah, it definitely feels a little out of date as well, but I think her voice is pretty kick-ass. She's got a badass voice. That's nice. So it hit #1 in Australia, Germany, Switzerland, and the UK, but it peaked at only number 56 in the US. Apparently we hate women here in God's country.
I mean, that is very easy to statistically back up.
Yeah. Quattro's career as a bassist,
Hey, let's go.
singer, and songwriter started considerably earlier when she and her older sister Patty put together an all-female garage rock band called the Pleasure Seekers. They released their first record on a small label in 1965 when the sisters were 15 and 17 respectively. Wow. Yeah, and signed to a major, Mercury, in 1968, for whom they released the single Light of Love. By 1971, Quatro had moved to England and was embarking on a solo career. She released her glam rock self-titled debut in 1973, which included the aforementioned Can the Can, and was a hit in Europe and Australia. Now, she has to date released a total of 18 studio albums, though really her time in the sort of pop chart sun was over by 1982. C'est la vie. Still, she is rocking to this day and also provides us with a fun fact. John, are you ready for what is a very John-friendly Suzi Quatro fun fact?
I cannot wait to what you define as a John-friendly fun fact.
Well, one of her albums is the cast recording of the 1986 London revival of Annie Get Your Gun, in which she starred as Annie Oakley.
Wow.
A woman of so many talents, right?
At least a triple threat.
At least a triple threat. We must be rolling along, but in conclusion, I'll quote Eastern Illinois University communications professor Frank W. Oglesby, who, in an academic article charmingly titled Suzi Quatro, a prototype in the archaeology of rock.
God, academic puns are the worst.
And you took issue with my fanny puns.
You aspire to be one of these people.
Oh, I so am going to be one of those people. Oglesby wrote that Quatro is, quote, a female rock pioneer, in some ways the female rock pioneer, a cornerstone in the archaeology of rock. So there you go. Scholarship, motherfuckers! John, before we let the Runaways, who were absolutely fucking incredible, sing us off, we've got one more huge 70s rock band with significant female membership we simply must mention. It's a band that you like.
Oh.
We're going to briefly chat about Heart.
Hey!
How do you know Heart?
Probably my mother.
Okay, good. So, I'm going to be honest here. I'm going to bring the mood down a little bit. I don't entirely love Heart.
Of course you don't.
I mean, look, they have a number of really great tunes, like awesome tunes.
Do you find it too produced?
No. My problem is that, as you just may come as a surprise to you, I'm kind of a heavy metal guy.
Oh.
Yeah, and
I thought you were a big Bonnie Raitt person.
I actually am. I'm a heavy metal / Bonnie Raitt guy.
Yes. All too common crossover.
Yes. While Heart have some genuinely heavy songs, they do a lot of 70s style soft rock as well.
No part of me would have ever deigned to call Heart a heavy metal band.
No, they're a rock band. They're a rock band and they cover sort of the whole spectrum. The soft rock stuff, it just is not my bag. It's just not my thing. Still, they have an incredible vocalist, Ann Wilson, one of my actual very favorite singers, and they have an additional female member, her sister, who's a guitarist and occasional vocalist as well, Nancy Wilson. So very important female membership in this very significant 70s soft-through hard rock band. I'd say they do both. Despite their eventual inclusion of these significant female rockers, they did begin as a boys' club. The band that would become Heart started off back in 1967 as The Army, evolving into Hocus Pocus in 1969.
Weird turn.
Yeah, and then White Heart in 1970.
They're all over the place.
Yeah, I don't know what the fuck they were thinking. Now, elder sister Ann joined up with White Heart sometime around 1973 as lead vocalist. Though, it's worth noting that she would also be credited with flute and guitar on a number of their tunes. At around the same time, the band became simply Heart. Now, not too long after, younger sister Nancy joined up, but this was despite some amount of resistance from the guys in the group because she was a Goyle guitarist. And women can sing, but women instrumentalists, as you well know, John, they often have the cooties. Though she was primarily their guitarist, Nancy has a pretty fascinating assortment of credits across Heart's discography. On the album Little Queen, for instance, she is credited with acoustic guitar, auto harp, vocals, mandolin, piano, electric guitar, blues harp, that's a 10-hole diatonic harmonica to you and me, and, on one track, lead vocals. Go Nancy. Well, anyhow, the reason I bring up Heart's third album, Little Queen, which was released in 1977, is because, number one, it opens with their most heavy metal tune, Barracuda, and two, the creation of Barracuda provides us with a story which helps to illustrate why it is so important that we go out of our way to celebrate our female rock musicians who have historically had a tough road to hoe. You want to hear the story?
I would love to hear a story.
Grand! In an epically classless move, following the release of their debut, Dreamboat Annie, Heart's then label, Mushroom Records, cooked up a publicity stunt by creating a fictional story implying an incestuous lesbian relationship between Ann and Nancy. Understandably, this shocked and horrified the sisters when Ann learned about it in the midst of an interview. So Barracuda's lyrics are a cri de coeur in reaction to Anne being asked about her lover, Nancy. How deliriously fucked up is that?
That's pretty messed up.
Yeah. So, John, could you give us an irate read of just a wee spot of the Barracuda lyric?
So this ain't the end, I saw you again today. I had to turn my heart away. Smiled like the sun, kisses for everyone, and tails it never fails. You lying so low in the weeds, I bet you gonna ambush me. You'd have me down, 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 down on my knees, now wouldn't you, Barracuda?
Ambush indeed. Now, I know there are some weird fucking challenges for women in entertainment, but I did not have fictional lesbian incest on my bingo card.
That's a deep cut.
Yeah. Unsurprisingly, Hart left Mushroom and released Little Queen on Portrait Records. Regardless, they came out of all of this with a tune so angry it actually managed to cross over from hard rock into serious heavy metal territory. Apparently, they stole the main riff from the band Nazareth, but I'm told that all the great artists steal. What are your thoughts on Barracuda, John?
It's a great song.
It is a great song. Would you call it a heavy metal song?
I mean, you know what? You have called less heavy things heavy metal, so sure.
Okay. So I have softened you up. I've tenderized the meat.
Please.
You being the meat.
Shut up. Move on.
All right.
Do not continue this metaphor. Cut this from the podcast. Go forward.
All right. A lot of Heart's music is too soft rock for me, but at their heaviest, they fucking rock. As I mentioned, I love Ann Wilson's voice as well. Now, my own favorite era of Heart, probably one you're pretty familiar with, is when they actually got a wee touch glam metal in the mid-'80s, and they recorded a bunch of fabulous power ballads. Are you familiar with some of those? Alone? And, Yeah. But that is beyond the purview of this particular discussion, so we're moving on. So look. This is all a prehistory, and we simply have got to be wrapping this up so we can move on to the beautiful, beautiful heavy metal goodness. And yet, I feel like we've just barely scratched the surface here.
We have got to move forward. Hold on, let me stop us.
That's what I do. Look,
Genuinely, it is what you do.
we haven't even mentioned one of my favorite artists of all, Joni Mitchell, and how we also neglected to discuss punk poet laureate Patti Smith. We kind of suck. But alas, a more complete overview of females in and around rock is simply beyond the scope of this podcast. We've got goddamned heavy metal to get to. John, are you excited for next episode when we meet some of the heavy metal leading ladies of the 1980s?
As always, I look forward to when this podcast talks about the subject matter it professes to discuss.
Which we seldom do.
Yeah.
But when we do it well. Okay, just one final bit of assigned listening to help get us in the mood. Though we've already discussed them on this podcast, I do think the Runaways were probably the single most important female precursor to the 80s metal we'll soon be discussing. The very earliest origin story of the Runaways begins at a 1975 party thrown by none other than Alice Cooper. At said party, problematic impresario Kim Fowley met a teenaged lyricist named Carrie Crome, who inspired him to start assembling an all-female band. Crome was friends with a guitarist named Joan Jett, who was then already in the process of assembling a band with drummer Sandy West. Lineups came and went, eventually coalescing into the classic lineup we know and love. Jett, West, guitarist Lita Ford, lead vocalist Sherry Curry, and bassist Jackie Fox. They released a classic self-titled debut on June 1st, 1976. Now, the debut wasn't a huge hit in the US, but the first single, Cherry Bomb, was massive in Japan, and the Runaways have always had quite a large following in the land of the rising sun. It would make me ever so happy if you could set us up for our closing assigned listening by reading a sample of the Cherry Bomb lyric in your mellow, resonant baritone. Everybody, after John finishes, pause the podcast and click on the appropriate link in the show notes for one final bit of ass-kicking assigned listening, courtesy of the Runaways.
Can't stay at home, can't stay in school. Old folks say, you poor little fool. Down the street, I'm the girl next door. I'm the fox you've been waiting for. Hello, Daddy. Hello, Mom. I'm your cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha cherry bomb. Hello, world. I'm your wild girl. I'm your cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha cherry bomb.
So, John, how can you not love that wonderful, wonderful song?
It's a good song.
Oh, you do like the song.
It's fine.
It's fine. It's not a great song.
It's not something I would really seek out.
Wow. My daughters are just like obsessed with that song.
That's great. Do I strike you as remotely similar to your daughters in any way?
A little bit.
Really?
Yeah.
And what way would that be?
You're small and adorable.
I am literally twice your size.
And
I
hairy,
am a
and hairy
giant
too.
man.
But you got the nice haircut. So
Thank you.
That's
feels good.
Well, I think you're a bit of a dummy, but we already knew that. So anyhow, it's about that time. We've done the thing today, I think. We've talked about a bunch of women who absolutely fucking rock. John, can I get a fuck yeah?
Fuck yeah.
All right. Next time, we're taking things up to 11 and getting serious about the amazing pioneering women who were first making heavy metal in the 1980s. Some of whom, incidentally, had previously been members of the Runaways. Small world. John, I know that everyone who listened is absolutely clamoring to scream at us about all the essential female artists we unforgivably, stupidly neglected. Now, can you remind all of our fans how to reach us so they can vent a bit of that white-hot justified rage?
As always, you can yell at the Heavy Metal 101 podcast anytime you'd like, either via social media, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and if it's still a thing by the time this is released, Threads. Or you can send us an email at heavymetal101podcast@gmail.com. And again, you could leave us a voicemail.
Sure can.
On our Spotify for Podcasters page. Boy, it just gets more obnoxious every time we talk about it. Get ready for this. To leave us a voicemail, simply visit podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/heavymetal101podcast.
So catchy, that link. So memorable.
Wow, I feel like it would be more efficient just to literally give them our actual phone numbers.
I'm going to give them your phone number.
Please don't do that.
Anyhow, if you like what we do, please scream it from the virtual rafters via ratings and reviews. And if you don't like what we do, keep your fucking trap shut.
Wow.
Oh, I joke. Thank you for listening. We love you all. So, John, I'm going to let the ladies sign us off, so we're done. It's Miller time.
And of course, you're a role model for a lot of girls who want to do what you do and get into rock and metal music. Do you feel like over the years you see more women in rock and metal than when you first started out?
Oh, absolutely. It's kind of like night and day. It's completely flipped. It used to be, not only was I, the only girl in a band on stage, but I was the only girl on tour. And now that's just not the case. Not only am I not at any given festival, we're all over the place. The women are taking over.